Hello and welcome to In the Court of the Wenton Knave, Space, Volume 1 and 2, live in Aachen in Germany, July the 11th, 1970. That really is the sweet spot for fans in a lot of ways, because that's basically In Rock had just come out. So this is summer 1970. They're absolutely on fire. They're not knackered. They've not been over-toured. Well, they kind of have been over-toured, but they're still on it and on fire. This is out of print, I think, so this is another one you can't get, but in truth it's on YouTube. It's one of them again. They're in a very different situation since the last live album we did. Because they were touring Europe relentlessly and not worrying about the US, the higher their profile goes, and they get more and more gigs. So they're touring a lot more now, which means, they're having to work very hard. Johnny's still trying to write an orchestral piece. No, not that orchestral piece. This is the next orchestral piece, which we'll talk about. Ian Gillan did Jesus Christ Superstar in the first 6 months of 1970, and they were touring all over Europe. So they're at this point, it's that they're well toured, but they're not worn out. And by the time In Rock came out, they had a fan base, so they all went out and bought the record, which was enough to get them on top of the pops, which was enough to get them even more exposure, and really start to get famous. They played 2 festivals on the July the 11th and July the 12th, so they played another festival the day after. These were stadiums, so these were big festivals. Must have been the biggest audiences up to that point, but it doesn't mean they're listening. I mean, at a festival, people are often just sitting there and not really. There's some music playing, but they're chilling, and especially back then. On the bill were Pink Floyd, there was Free, there was Caravan, and Amon Dull 2 were all there. There was loads of other bands as well, so it's quite a lineup. There is the story. This is such an overly told story about for every gig where the roadie poured too much petrol into the dummy amp that were going to blow up for the big finale, and the curtains caught fire. And I don't know if that's this gig or not. It feels like it is that gig. That might just be a sort of mythological thing, and it's some other gig. But there is a Richie Blackmore quote about this, because this is a bootleg. He says it's the sound of burning wood for 20 minutes because it was all on fire. That could just be his guitar sacrifice, to be honest, but that's only 7 minutes long, actually, believe it or not. But yes, so as this was bootlegged, this was a bootleg. This was completely unofficial, and this is the official release of it, the official bootleg. It impressed them enough to record a show in November. But it sounds like they just didn't listen to it. They must have been too busy and forgotten about it or something, because that was another one kept in the vaults, I think, until the 80s. That was Scandinavian Nights. That's another great one as well. It's Aachen in Germany. This is 1970. There was some serious civil unrest at the time. Mad hippies thinking they're anarchists, wanting concerts to be free. Music should all be free, and etc. How's that going to work? Nobody knows. And doing things like setting fire to the doors outside while Deep Purple are playing inside. Not this concert. It's that same stuff that inspired Holiday in Berlin. I think that was a 68 tour. I think this is 1970. Given that, it's kind of surprising it was recorded, isn't it? Or not? I don't know. I mean, the bootlegging maybe was seen as a bit anarchic and a bit, but we'll give it to the people for free, or very cheap. Bootlegs aren't cheap, of course. I think apparently they were cheap very, very early on, and then they weren't. They certainly cost more than a normal album, and are obviously of lower quality. It did turn out later on, when people collected all the bootlegs, that they were all taken from this one recording. It's only one bootleg, almost. Fortunately, other shows were recorded, but they appeared later. H-Bomb was the name of it. Space. You know, this one's they called it Space Volume 1 and 2, so that does sound like the original one. Sonic Zoom, which is of course the name of the series of official bootlegs, and Darker Than Blue was another name for it, which is the name of the Deep Purple fanzine. So legend has it that it was directly plugged into the PA and recorded under the stage in a camper van. So there was a man in a camper van recording it, allegedly. That's what they say. It's all very hippie and etc. Before Scandinavian Nights came out in the 80s or 1990 or whenever it came out, this would have been essential, because there would have been no extended Wring That Neck, no extended Mandrake Root, which is hard to believe now. It's such a big part of it. And you couldn't get it. You only had those very, very weak album versions. So, it would have been for those who know what they were like early on in 70, 71, 69. And it's funny how they didn't change the set list. I think I said this in the previous video. Although the album came out, they just carried on with the same set list. It's a very Ritchie Blackmore thing. Very fixed set lists. And in 1993 we discovered the rest of the band didn't agree, apparently. But he wouldn't change the set. It is missing the first part of the set. Okay, it's only 4 tracks. Wring That Neck, Black Night, Paint It Black, Mandrake Root. So they're not even in the right order. So it should have been Speaking, Into the Fire and Child in Time first. It's not completely clear if it was played or not. Gillan sounds a bit rough. John Lord in some interview did say, he had a cold for that one. There's a lot of distortion on the mic as well, so the vocals didn't come through well. I think it's very unlikely they didn't play Child in Time. I think they always played Child in Time. And judging by the comments right at the start of Wring That Neck, I think that they did play Child in Time. It sounds like they've just played it, and John Lord even plays a little bit of solo motif from it. So I think they did play those first 3 songs. They just weren't recorded, or whatever, or it was lost or something. This is the original double album track list, like I said. So you've got Black Night after Wring That Neck instead of as the encore, which is very obviously to fit it onto 2 vinyls. Wring That Neck is fantastic. Might be my favourite version of Wring That Neck. Loads of energy from Lord and Blackmore on here. Ritchie's very much in play well mode. Sometimes he can be in show off mode where it's amazing but over the top. Sometimes he can be a bit subdued and just playing nicely. This is the really play well mode. John is his absolute best as well. It's so inventive. He's the star of the show for this one, easily. It's a very keys heavy mix though, so there's a lot of keyboard over the guitar actually. So if you're a John Lord fan, this is essential. So after the main Wring That Neck finishes, we now have a bass solo, which I'd forgotten about. They actually improvise the return to the main theme after that as well, which is fantastic, and you can tell it's just off the cuff. They don't do what they traditionally do. Then we get the keyboard solo. It's nearly all completely new and so creative, until he plays 3 Blind Mice, which is really good. Heavy 3 Blind Mice, and a bit of In the Hall of the Mountain King as well. Absolutely awesome stuff. And then we've got to about 18 minutes in, and we only get a 2-minute guitar solo. So he cuts it completely short. Maybe they were aware of a curfew, I don't know, and they just wanted to keep the time for Mandrake Root so they could set fire to the curtains. I don't know. Absolutely great version. That first track is the reason for this album for me. It's so great. Black Night cuts straight into Black Night, so we don't get into some chatter, which obviously would have been this is our encore. Ian Gillan does sound a bit out of it, it has to be said. He sounds drunk, but it's still a really good version. It's still similar to the album version. It's not as wild as the 72 versions, but certainly more interesting. I think the playing is more creative, I think. The next version in November, I think, is better. There's nothing else to say about Black Night. Paint It Black. 11 minutes 42. It just fades into the end of Ian Gillan introducing it, so we don't get all the chatter. As I did say, I struggle with drum solos. As much of a fan of Ian Pace I am, and I've never been convinced by the Paint It Black instrumental. It's best so far. Loads of energy. The recording suits it. If you like drum solos, you will definitely like that one. And finally, we have the longest track for Mandrake Root, because it's got the introduction in the start, but it's 33 minutes 37. This was split into 2 on the original vinyl. There is no edit here, so it must have been that on the vinyl it faded out, but it faded back in again on the next side without losing any information. So they must have just fit those 2 together, I assume, because I didn't see it. I didn't notice a join. But like I said, there's loads of Ian Gillan intro. It definitely sounds like he's drunk. He asked the audience to take their clothes off. So yeah, song starts. Gillan is amazing on Mandrake Root, and sadly, the vocals are completely distorted. They're completely overloaded, so it's obviously turned up too loud. That spoils the song bit. Sadly, it's okay. There's a good one of those to come. It is surprising how clear and atmospheric the sound is, given how bad the vocals sound. The instrumental stuff is great. Once again, as with Ring That, John Lord is on fire. Possibly literally, but we don't know. The whole organ solo is so inventive. Crazy stuff. And then there's melodic stuff. He does his atmospheric chords and the dissonant sort of sci-fi pew stuff. Longest of any version that goes on for. It's just great. And the guitar solo is a really good one. Really, really wild whammy bar stuff in there. We get a bit of vocals from Gillan. We get Come On You Mothers, and then another organ solo. I wonder if there was a broken guitar then or something. It was the whammy bar stuff was pretty wild, whatever he was doing, because there's no guitar over this bit. And again, John Lord gets some amazing noises out of the thing, but then the guitar comes back in for the dun dun bit. Then we get the scales, we get that bit, and then there's this is the bit I've never been convinced by, when there's nothing happening. They seem to be improvising, but it's like they can't decide what to do. It must have been something that worked live, not on a recording. And we get more of Ian Gillan like wailing, like Robert Plant, that kind of thing. And then a riff I've not heard before, which is interesting. The bass seems to copy the riff, so it sounds like it's pre-written, but I've never heard it before, so that's really interesting. Then we get the percussive organ thing and the call and response stuff. The guitar sound has deteriorated there, so I wonder if there's something's happened. Maybe it's the setting fire to the amp or something. Then you get wild percussive guitar bit, which is a great return back into the main theme, or the energetic bit. Most of this is unique to this performance. So then you've got the last bit, which is just the Blue Rondeau Turk from when the Nice played Blue Rondeau Turk, which they did in Space Trucking. Then you get the guitar sacrifice. That must have been the curtains set fire to and all that stuff. And then you get the insane ending and wind down at the end. Crazy stuff. Another recommended bit of awesome. See you next time.